The crisp autumn wind swept through the streets of London in October 1985, as Master Hiroshi Tanaka carefully folded his worn karate and placed it in his small suitcase. At 65 years old, his hair had turned completely white, but his movements remained as smooth as flowing water. Standing at only 5 feet 4 inches, his small frame held a lifetime of martial arts knowledge that few in the world could match. Master Tanaka had never planned to visit England. He spent most of his days teaching in his small dojo in Okinawa, Japan, where the gentle sound of waves mixed with the kies of his students. But when the British Martial Arts Association invited him to demonstrate traditional Goju-Ryu karate at their biggest exhibition of the year, his students convinced him to go. "The world needs to see true karate," they had said. The exhibition hall buzzed with excitement on that Saturday morning. Hundreds of martial artists from different styles had gathered to showcase their skills. The air smelled of leather wrestling mats and fresh paint from the newly decorated venue. Master Tanaka sat quietly in the preparation area, watching young fighters stretch and practice their flashy kicks. As he prepared for his demonstration, Master Tanaka noticed a group of royal guards in their off-duty clothes, watching the various performances. One of them stood out, James Bennett, a tall, muscular man in his late 20s with short blonde hair and a square jaw. Bennett was well known in London's boxing circles for his quick hands and knockout power. He had won several amateur boxing championships and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to winning. Master Tanaka's demonstration began simply. He moved through the basic stances of Goju-Ryu karate, his feet sliding across the mat without making a sound. His old hands moved through the air with precision, showing techniques that had been passed down through generations. Some people in the audience watched with respect, understanding the depth of what they were seeing. Others, including Bennett and his friends, seemed less impressed. "Look at this old man doing his slow dance," Bennett whispered to his friends, but loud enough for others to hear. "This stuff might look pretty, but it would never work in a real fight." His friends laughed, and Bennett grew bolder. "We learn actual fighting techniques in our military training. This traditional nonsense would get you knocked out in seconds." The whispers spread through the crowd like ripples in a pond. Some people frowned at Bennett's disrespect, while others nodded in agreement. Master Tanaka continued his demonstration, appearing not to notice the comments. But his student and interpreter, Ken Watanabe, saw a subtle change in his teacher's movements. They became slightly sharper, more focused. The demonstration reached its climax as Master Tanaka began breaking boards and tiles. Each break was clean and precise, accompanied by sharp kies that echoed through the hall. Even some of the skeptics began to pay closer attention, but Bennett remained unimpressed. As Master Tanaka finished his demonstration with a respectful bow, Bennett stepped forward from the crowd. His voice carried across the now quiet hall. "That's all very nice for a show, but how about testing these moves against someone who knows real fighting?" The room fell silent. Master Tanaka stood still, his hands folded calmly in front of him. Ken, his interpreter, looked worried as he translated Bennett's words. The old master's face remained peaceful, but those who knew him well could see a flicker of something in his eyes. Not anger, but perhaps a hint of sadness mixed with determination. Through his interpreter, Master Tanaka spoke softly. "In my many years of teaching, I have learned that those who speak loudest about fighting often understand it least. But sometimes, a demonstration is worth more than words." The challenge had been made, and the air in the exhibition hall grew thick with tension. Everyone present knew they were about to witness something unprecedented. A clash between two very different worlds of martial arts, between youth and experience, between pride and wisdom. The next few hours at the exhibition hall turned into a whirlwind of activity. News of the challenge spread quickly through the building, and soon reporters from local newspapers arrived, their cameras flashing as they captured photos of both Master Tanaka and James Bennett. The exhibition organizers huddled in corners, speaking in worried whispers about safety concerns and legal liability. Bennett stood surrounded by his fellow royal guards, his chest puffed out as he spoke to anyone who would listen. "I'll show everyone that all this ancient martial arts stuff is just theater," he declared, shadow boxing and throwing quick jabs at the air. His friends patted him on the back and laughed at his jokes about the old man's dance moves. In a quiet room away from the crowd, Master Tanaka sat cross-legged on the floor, sipping green tea with his interpreter, Ken. The old master's face remained calm, but Ken noticed how his teacher's eyes occasionally closed in deep thought. When Ken expressed concern about the challenge, Master Tanaka simply smiled and said through him, "Sometimes the loudest lessons are taught without words." The exhibition organizers finally approached Master Tanaka with papers to sign. They had decided to allow the match, but only under strict rules, light contact only, 3 2-minute rounds, and both participants had to wear protective gear. Master Tanaka nodded at each requirement. While in the main hall, Bennett argued against the safety rules, calling them unnecessary. "I don't need any special protection," Bennett boasted to the growing crowd. "This isn't some deadly martial arts showdown. It's just going to be me showing everyone how useless these old techniques are in the real world." His words drew mixed reactions. Some people cheered, while others shook their heads in disapproval. The news spread beyond the exhibition hall. By late afternoon, local martial arts schools had heard about the challenge, and their students began arriving to witness the event. The crowd grew larger, and the atmosphere became electric with anticipation. Some people placed informal bets, with most favoring the younger, stronger Bennett. The exhibition's head organizer, Mr. Thompson, a tall man with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, paced nervously between the two camps. He had organized martial arts events for 20 years, but never had he seen such a clash of styles and philosophies. This could either be a disaster or a teaching moment, he muttered to his assistant. In the makeshift changing room, Bennett's confidence continued to grow. He stripped off his shirt to reveal his muscular physique, drawing admiring glances from onlookers. "Look at this," he said to his friends, flexing his arms. "A lifetime of real training, not just memorizing fancy movements." He wrapped his hands with boxing tape, refusing the protective gear offered by the organizers. Meanwhile, Master Tanaka changed into a fresh white jay, its crisp fabric carrying the embroidered emblem of his Okinawa dojo. His movements were unhurried as he warmed up with slow, deliberate exercises. A few experienced martial artists who watched him recognized the deadly precision in even his simplest movements, but they kept their observations to themselves. As evening approached, the exhibition hall buzzed with excitement. The regular schedule of demonstrations had been forgotten, replaced by this unexpected showdown. People took sides, arguing about the effectiveness of traditional martial arts versus modern fighting techniques. The division in the crowd reflected a larger debate in the martial arts world, the classic conflict between the old and the new, tradition and innovation. Ken watched all of this with growing concern. He had studied with Master Tanaka for 15 years and had never seen him participate in such a public challenge. "Master," he said in Japanese, "perhaps we should reconsider. This young man clearly wants to hurt you." Master Tanaka folded his G-sleeves carefully and replied with a gentle smile. "In 45 years of teaching, I have learned that the most important lessons often come from unexpected places. Tonight, many people will learn something, including young Mr. Bennett." The exhibition hall had transformed into a makeshift arena. The regular demonstration mats were pushed together to create a larger fighting space, surrounded by rows of chairs filled with eager spectators. The overhead lights seemed brighter now, focused on the central mat where history was about to be made. At exactly 7:00 p.m., James Bennett strode onto the mat. He had removed his shirt, revealing a physique sculpted by years of military training and boxing. He bounced on the balls of his feet, throwing practice punches that cut through the air with impressive speed. His supporters, mostly fellow Royal Guards and boxing enthusiasts, cheered and whistled from their seats. Master Tanaka entered from the opposite side. His white jai seemed to glow under the bright lights, and his bare feet made no sound as he walked across the mat. The old master moved with the same careful precision he had shown during his earlier demonstration. The martial artists in the crowd noticed how he seemed to flow rather than walk, his body relaxed but ready. Mr. Thompson, the head organizer, called both men to the center of the mat. He looked nervous as he explained the rules one final time. 3 2-minute rounds, light contact only, and the match stops immediately if I call it. Bennett nodded impatiently while Master Tanaka bowed respectfully. When Thompson asked them to shake hands, Bennett thrust his hand forward aggressively. Master Tanaka took it gently, his weathered hands surprisingly soft. The timekeeper rang the bell, and the hall fell silent. Bennett immediately assumed his boxing stance, hands high, elbows tucked, bouncing lightly. Master Tanaka stood still, his hands loose at his sides, looking remarkably small compared to his opponent. For a moment, nothing happened. The crowd held its breath. Bennett struck first, just as everyone expected. He launched forward with a lightning-fast jab that would have knocked out many opponents. But Master Tanaka wasn't there anymore. He had shifted slightly, barely moving, yet somehow causing Bennett's punch to miss by inches. The young guard's momentum carried him forward, forcing him to reset his stance. Frustrated by the miss, Bennett unleashed a combination of punches: jab, cross, hook, each thrown with perfect boxing form. To the amazement of the crowd, none of them landed. Master Tanaka moved like smoke, his body seeming to flow around the punches without actually stepping away. He hadn't thrown a single strike yet, but Bennett was already breathing harder, his face reddening with effort and embarrassment. "Fight back," Bennett shouted, launching another attack. This time he added kicks to his combination, breaking away from pure boxing. His legs swept through the air where Master Tanaka's head had been a split second before. The old master finally moved decisively, stepping into Bennett's space instead of away from it. What happened next was so quick that many in the audience missed it. As Bennett threw a powerful right hook, Master Tanaka's left hand rose in a simple circular motion, a basic karate technique called kakyuk, the hooking block. His timing was perfect. Bennett's punch, instead of landing, was redirected. The young guard found his own momentum turned against him, his body following his diverted punch. For a brief moment, Bennett was airborne. He hung in the air almost comically, his face showing surprise rather than fear. Then gravity took over, and he crashed face first onto the mat with a loud thud that echoed through the silent hall. The entire exchange, from the start of Bennett's attack to his fall, had taken less than 2 seconds. The crowd gasped collectively. Some stood up for a better view. Bennett lay on the mat, stunned not by pain. Master Tanaka's technique had been perfectly controlled, but by the sheer unexpectedness of what had happened. His face pressed against the mat, arms splayed out, he looked like a puppet whose strings had been suddenly cut. Master Tanaka stepped back and waited, hands again relaxed at his sides. He watched Bennett with genuine concern, ready to help if needed. The hall remained absolutely silent, hundreds of people trying to process what they had just witnessed. Even Bennett's most vocal supporters stood speechless, their previous bravado forgotten. In just 30 seconds, without throwing a single punch, Master Tanaka had demonstrated something that would take others years to explain: the true essence of traditional martial arts. Time seemed to freeze in the exhibition hall. Bennett remained face down on the mat, his mind struggling to understand what had just happened. The silence was so complete that people could hear the gentle hum of the overhead lights. Nobody moved, as if breaking this stillness might shatter something important. For Bennett, these seconds stretched into an eternity. His body wasn't hurt. Master Tanaka's technique had been too perfect for that, but something else was breaking inside him. His entire worldview about fighting, about strength, about what it meant to be a warrior, was crumbling like a sand castle hit by a wave. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, waiting to see what he would do next. In the crowd, Bennett's friends stood rigid with shock. They had come expecting to cheer their friend's victory, to laugh at the old man's defeat. Now they watched helplessly as their champion lay humbled on the mat. Some looked away, unable to bear witnessing their friend's embarrassment. Others stared, trying to understand how their strong, skilled companion had been so easily defeated. Master Tanaka remained still, his posture relaxed but alert. His eyes never left Bennett, showing neither triumph nor contempt, only patient attention. Ken, his interpreter, watched his teacher with a new understanding. In all their years together, he had never seen such a perfect demonstration of karate's true principles: victory without violence, strength without aggression. The head organizer, Mr. Thompson, stepped forward to check on Bennett, but Master Tanaka raised his hand slightly, signaling him to wait. The old master understood that this moment was crucial, not for his reputation, but for Bennett's future. How the young man chose to rise from this fall would define him more than any victory could have. Slowly, Bennett pushed himself up to his knees. His face was red, not from impact but from shame. His ears burned as he heard whispers start to spread through the crowd. He had 2 choices. He could jump up aggressively, trying to save face with anger, or he could accept this moment for what it was: a lesson. As Bennett struggled with this decision, he felt a presence near him. Looking up, he saw Master Tanaka standing close, one hand extended toward him. The old master's face showed something Bennett had never expected to see: respect. Not mockery, not pride, not even pity. Just simple, genuine respect. The hall held its breath. This was more than just a fighter helping another fighter up. This was a moment of truth that would reveal the true character of both men. Bennett looked at the offered hand, then at his own still clenched fists. In that moment, he remembered all his boasts, all his mockery of traditional martial arts, all his certainty about his own superiority. Then something remarkable happened. Bennett's fists slowly unclenched. His shoulders, which had been tight with tension, relaxed. His face, which had been twisted with embarrassment, softened. He reached up and took Master Tanaka's hand. As the old master helped him to his feet, Bennett did something that shocked everyone who knew him. He bowed. It wasn't a perfect bow, not the formal bow of traditional martial arts, but a slightly awkward bend at the waist that carried more sincerity than any polished movement could have shown. Master Tanaka returned the bow, matching Bennett's depth exactly, showing neither more nor less respect than he had been given. In this simple exchange, the true victory was achieved. Not the victory of one fighter over another, but the triumph of wisdom over pride, of respect over arrogance. The crowd, sensing the significance of what they were witnessing, began to applaud. It started slowly, then built into a thunderous ovation. They weren't cheering for the winner of a fight anymore. They were celebrating something far more rare and precious, the moment a true warrior was born. As the applause finally died down, something unusual began to happen in the exhibition hall. People who had been divided just hours ago, traditional martial artists and modern fighters, young and old, supporters of both sides, started to mingle and talk. The barrier that had separated them seemed to melt away, replaced by a shared understanding of what they had just witnessed. Master Tanaka moved to leave the mat, but Bennett's voice stopped him. "Master," he called out, his voice shaking slightly. "Please wait." The crowd hushed again, curious about what would happen next. Ken, the interpreter, quickly moved to Master Tanaka's side. Bennett walked up to Master Tanaka, his steps uncertain but determined. Standing before the old master, he seemed to shrink despite his larger size. His next words came out slowly, carefully chosen. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking directly into Master Tanaka's eyes. "I was wrong about everything. About traditional martial arts, about what makes a true fighter, about," he paused, swallowing hard, "about you." Through Ken's translation, Master Tanaka listened carefully, his face showing genuine interest in Bennett's words. When Bennett finished, the old master smiled, not the polite smile of earlier, but a warm, genuine expression that transformed his entire face. "Young man," Master Tanaka replied through Ken, "in my 65 years, I've learned that being wrong is often the first step to becoming right. Your strength was never in question, but strength without wisdom is like a boat without a rudder. It may move powerfully, but it cannot choose its direction." As Ken translated these words, Bennett's eyes widened with understanding. Several older martial artists in the crowd nodded in agreement, some wiping away unexpected tears. They had heard similar words before, but seeing them demonstrated so perfectly made them new again. Then Master Tanaka did something that surprised everyone. He reached into his guy and pulled out a small, worn book. It was his personal training journal, filled with handwritten notes from his own teacher, dating back 40 years. He held it out to Bennett. "In our tradition," he explained through Ken, "we believe that the deepest lessons cannot be taught in a single moment. They must be learned slowly, like water shaping a stone. Would you be interested in learning more?" Bennett stared at the offered book, understanding the significance of the gesture. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for it. "Are you offering to teach me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Master Tanaka nodded. "If you are willing to learn, I will stay in London for 1 month before returning to Okinawa. We can begin tomorrow morning." The young guard's face lit up with an emotion no one had ever seen on him before. Pure, humble joy. Without hesitation, he dropped into a formal bow, much better than his first attempt. "Thank you, Sensei," he said, using the Japanese word for teacher. "I would be honored." Mr. Thompson, who had been watching everything unfold, stepped forward with tears in his eyes. "Master Tanaka," he said, We would be honored if you would use our facility for your teachings. Free of charge, of course. As word spread through the hall about what was happening, other martial artists began to approach. Some were experienced practitioners who wanted to learn from Master Tanaka, others were beginners inspired by what they had seen. Even some of Bennett's fellow royal guards stepped forward, their previous skepticism replaced by genuine interest. Master Tanaka looked at the growing group and smiled again. He turned to Ken and spoke softly in Japanese. Ken listened, then addressed the crowd. Master Tanaka says that this is how true martial arts have always been taught, not through challenge or conflict, but through the humble sharing of knowledge. He welcomes anyone who wishes to learn. And so, on that evening, in a London exhibition hall, what had begun as a contest of pride transformed into something far more valuable, a bridge between different worlds, a connection between past and present, and a reminder that the greatest victories often come in the most unexpected forms. The next morning arrived with a gentle rain typical of London weather. At 5:30 a.m., Bennett stood outside the exhibition hall, wearing a newly purchased white tie. He felt strange in the traditional uniform, but somehow it felt right. He was the first to arrive, 30 minutes early for his first lesson. To his surprise, Master Tanaka was already there, calmly sweeping the mat with an old broom. The old master didn't look up as Bennett entered, but simply pointed to another broom leaning against the wall. Without a word, Bennett understood. He took off his shoes, bowed before stepping on the mat, and began sweeping the other end. For 15 minutes, they swept in silence. Bennett noticed how Master Tanaka moved the broom with the same fluid grace he had shown during their match. Even this simple task, Bennett realized, was part of the training. Every stroke of the broom became a lesson in movement, in patience, in paying attention to detail. Other students began to arrive, a mix of experienced martial artists, curious beginners, and 3 of Bennett's fellow royal guards who had been inspired by yesterday's events. Each person who entered was handed a broom, until 10 people were silently sweeping the already clean mat. Some smiled at the apparent absurdity, but none complained. When Master Tanaka finally put his broom away, the real training began, but it wasn't what anyone expected. There were no spectacular kicks, no powerful punches. Instead, they spent 2 hours practicing how to stand correctly, how to breathe properly, and how to walk with awareness. Through Ken's translation, Master Tanaka explained that these basics were like the roots of a tree, invisible but essential. For Bennett, it was a humbling experience. He who had prided himself on his fighting skills now struggled to maintain a basic stance. His legs shook from the effort of holding simple positions. Yet, each time he faltered, Master Tanaka was there, making small adjustments with infinite patience. Strong roots, the old master would say through Ken, make strong trees. Days turned into weeks. Every morning, the group would gather before sunrise. Every morning began with cleaning, followed by basics that seemed simple but revealed endless depth. Bennett's body acted in ways that boxing had never caused, but his mind felt clearer than ever before. The change in Bennett became noticeable to everyone around him. His fellow royal guards saw how his usual aggressive stance had softened into something more balanced and aware. His commanding officer commented on his improved focus during duties. Even his family noticed how he had become calmer, more patient. One morning, after 3 weeks of training, Master Tanaka asked Bennett to demonstrate a basic blocking technique for the class. As Bennett moved through the technique, he suddenly understood something that made him stop mid-motion. The block wasn't just a block. It was the same movement that had defeated him in their match, but now he saw it with new eyes. It was both defense and attack, both yielding and controlling, all in one simple motion. Master Tanaka nodded, seeing the realization in his student's eyes. Through Ken, he said, "Now you begin to see. In traditional martial arts, every technique contains its opposite, just as every ending contains a beginning." That evening, Bennett stayed late to clean the dojo, just as he had every day for the past 3 weeks. But this time, as he moved the broom across the floor, he noticed something different. His movement had changed. The broom no longer felt like a tool in his hands. It had become an extension of his body, just like Master Tanaka had tried to explain on that first morning. Looking at his reflection in the dojo's mirror, Bennett hardly recognized himself. The arrogant young man who had challenged Master Tanaka seemed like a stranger now. In his place stood someone new, someone who was beginning to understand that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from mastering oneself. As he put the broom away, Bennett bowed to the empty dojo, a gesture that now felt as natural as breathing. He understood that this was just the beginning of his journey, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't in a hurry to reach the destination. 10 years passed like falling leaves in the wind. On a crisp autumn morning in 1995, very similar to the day when this story began, James Bennett stood in his own dojo in central London. The walls were decorated with both British and Japanese calligraphy, and a black and white photo of Master Tanaka hung in a place of honor. Bennett, now 40 years old, watched his students clean the dojo floor before morning practice. Among them were police officers, military personnel, and even a few royal guards, people who, like him 10 years ago, had once believed that traditional martial arts were outdated. Now they moved with careful attention, understanding that even cleaning held lessons in movement and mindfulness. His dojo had become famous, but not for the reasons most martial arts schools gained fame. There were no tournament trophies on display, no flashy promotional posters. Instead, people came because they had heard stories about a place where true martial arts spirit was kept alive, where ancient wisdom met modern life in perfect balance. Every year, Bennett traveled to Okinawa to train with Master Tanaka, who was now 75, but still moved with the same fluid grace. The old master had slowed down a bit, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. Their relationship had deepened into something beyond teacher and student. They had become like father and son. During his last visit, Master Tanaka had given Bennett an unexpected gift: the white jai he had worn during their famous match. It hung framed on the dojo wall, not as a trophy of victory, but as a reminder of the day when losing a fight had led to winning a much greater battle. On this particular morning, Bennett noticed a new student among the group. The young man moved with the stiff confidence of a boxer, his eyes occasionally showing hints of skepticism as he watched others perform traditional kata. Bennett smiled, recognizing his younger self in the student's attitude. During the water break, the young man approached Bennett. "Sensei," he said, trying to hide his doubts, "I trained in boxing for years. Some of these movements seem inefficient. Wouldn't it be better to just throw a straight punch?" Instead of answering, Bennett walked to a small garden behind the dojo. He picked up a leaf that had fallen from a maple tree and held it up. "Watch," he said. He let the leaf go. It swayed back and forth, floating gently to the ground in a flowing pattern. "Now watch this," he said, taking another leaf and crushing it slightly. When he let it go, it fell straight down. Which one was more efficient? The young man looked confused. The second one fell faster. Bennett nodded. Yes, but which one better used the air around it? Which one turned resistance into assistance? Which one maintained its integrity? He paused, letting the question sink in. In martial arts, as in life, the straightest path is not always the best path. The lesson was interrupted by the arrival of a special visitor. Ken, Master Tanaka's old interpreter, who had become a teacher himself. He brought news that made Bennett's heart both heavy and proud. Master Tanaka had decided to retire from active teaching, and he had recommended that his most promising students from around the world, including Bennett, begin visiting each other's dojos to share knowledge. That evening, after training, Bennett sat alone in his dojo, just as he had seen Master Tanaka do so many times. The setting sun cast long shadows through the windows, and the silence seemed to hold all the lessons of the past 10 years. He thought about the young man who had questioned traditional techniques, about Master Tanaka's retirement, about the continuing cycle of learning and teaching. He understood now that what had happened that day in 1985 wasn't just about martial arts. It was about the endless human journey from ignorance to understanding, from arrogance to humility, from strength of body to strength of character. As darkness fell, Bennett rose and bowed to the dojo, to the photo of Master Tanaka, to the memory of that fateful day, and to all the lessons yet to come. He understood that his greatest responsibility now was not just to teach techniques, but to pass on the deeper wisdom that Master Tanaka had shared. The understanding that true victory lies not in defeating others, but in defeating the limitations within ourselves.